I sat hidden behind a pillar, clutching my tea at my sister's wedding. Everyone acted like I wasn't part of the family. Then a stranger sat next to me and whispered, "Just go along with it, pretend you're my date." When he stood to speak, every head turned. My sister's smile vanished. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when someone you love treats you like you're utterly invisible? What if that someone is your own sister, and she does it on her wedding day, shoving you literally behind a pillar? How much does it take before you finally decide you're done being a ghost in your own family? Honestly, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. It all started with this cream-colored invitation, 3 months earlier. It landed in my mailbox on a Tuesday in April. I was living in Denver then, pouring my heart into my job as a pastry chef at this cute little boutique bakery downtown. My apartment was small, yeah, but it was my cozy space, always smelling faintly of vanilla and cinnamon from my late-night baking experiments. That morning, I'd been up since 4 a.m., perfecting a new honey lavender croissant recipe. So, when I finally stumbled home around 2 p.m., exhausted, I almost missed it, this elegant envelope wedged between bills and junk mail. Victoria was getting married. My older sister. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong in our mother's eyes. The invitation was exactly what you'd expect from her. Formal, traditional, embossed lettering announcing her union to someone named Gregory. I'd never heard her mention him. Not once, during our increasingly rare phone calls. I should have been happy for her. Sisters are supposed to cheer each other on through big life moments. But holding that invitation, all I could think about was the last family dinner, 6 months prior. Thanksgiving at Mom's house. I'd brought a pumpkin cheesecake. 2 days, I'd spent perfecting those spiced cream cheese layers, that crisp ginger snap crust. It was beautiful. Victoria? She showed up with a store-bought pie. "Elizabeth, you really shouldn't have gone to so much trouble," Mom said, barely even glancing at my cheesecake before relegating it to the far corner of the buffet. "Victoria's pie looks lovely, so classic and traditional." That's just how it always went. Victoria could show up empty-handed and be praised just for gracing us with her presence. I could bring the moon on a silver platter, and it would somehow be too much, too showy, trying too hard. It was infuriating. Tucked inside the wedding invitation was a small, handwritten note card from Victoria in her perfect cursive. "Elizabeth, I know we haven't been as close lately, but it would mean everything to have you there. You're my only sister." I called her that evening. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. "Victoria, I got your invitation." "Congratulations." "Oh, good. I was worried it might get lost." "Can you make it?" "Of course, I wouldn't miss it." "Tell me about Gregory. How did you two meet?" There was a pause, just long enough to make me wonder. "At a pharmaceutical conference. He's a regional director at Bennett Health Solutions. Very successful, very established. Mother absolutely adores him." Of course she did. I wondered if Victoria loved him, or if she just loved how he looked on paper. "I'm really happy for you," I said, genuinely trying to mean it. "Thank you. Listen, I have to run. We're meeting with the wedding planner in 20 minutes. I'll send you more details later." She hung up before I could even say goodbye. I stared at my phone at the abrupt end to our conversation and felt something familiar settle in my chest. It wasn't quite sadness. It wasn't quite anger. It was just this dull ache of being perpetually secondary. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by. Work, preparations, trying to push down that familiar ache. I bought a new dress, a soft blue that flattered my skin without being too, look at me. I arranged time off from the bakery, which my boss was not thrilled about, since June is our busiest season. I probably should have known something was really wrong when Victoria didn't ask me to be a bridesmaid. I found out through her social media posts that she had 5 bridesmaids, college friends, work friends, even our cousin Jessica, who she'd barely spoken to in years. But not me. "The wedding party is already set," she'd explained when I finally cornered her about it. And in that moment, I understood. I'd never truly be part of her inner circle. Our shared childhood meant absolutely nothing compared to her current social standing. The wedding was set for a Saturday in late June at this incredibly upscale resort outside Denver. I drove there alone, my dress hanging carefully in the back seat, a small gift wrapped in silver paper on the passenger seat. I'd spent weeks agonizing over what to give them, finally settling on a set of handcrafted ceramic bowls from a local artist. Something thoughtful. Something that showed I cared. The resort was stunning. Manicured lawns stretched towards majestic mountain views. The ceremony site overlooked a pristine lake. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, flowers bursting from every surface. Victoria had spared no expense, which, let's be real, meant our mother had spared no expense. This was the wedding she'd always dreamed of, the perfect culmination of her perfect daughter's perfect life. I arrived 2 hours early, hoping to find Victoria, to offer help, or at least some sisterly support. Instead, I walked into chaos. The bridal suite was buzzing with laughter, women in matching robes, champagne glasses clinking, a photographer capturing every perfect moment. I knocked softly on the open door. Victoria glanced up from her makeup chair, her eyes meeting mine for just a second before sliding away. "Elizabeth, you're here early." Her tone was flat. "I thought maybe I could help with something?" "Oh, everything's under control. The wedding planner has it all handled. Why don't you go find your seat? The ceremony starts soon." One of the bridesmaids, a blonde I didn't recognize, giggled and whispered something to the woman next to her. They both looked at me and smiled in that way people do when they're being polite, but really, really wish you'd just leave. My face burned. I backed out of the room. I shouldn't have come early. I shouldn't have assumed I'd be welcome in that inner sanctum of pre-wedding preparations. The ceremony site was still being prepared as I made my way outside. Staff members rushed around, making last-minute adjustments, perfecting what was already perfect. I wandered to the guest seating area, looking for my name card. Row after row of chairs stretched out. The front rows were clearly marked for immediate family and VIPs. I expected to find my name somewhere in the second or third row. Close enough to show I mattered. Far enough to acknowledge I wasn't part of Victoria's daily life. I found my name card. In the very last row. Partially hidden behind a decorative pillar supporting the ceremony arbor. From that seat, I'd have a completely blocked view of the ceremony, unable to see my sister's face as she said her vows. I stood there, holding that little card with my name printed in elegant script, and something inside me just snapped. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. This was Victoria's way of putting me exactly where she thought I belonged, out of sight, out of mind, barely acknowledged. I could have left. I could have driven back to Denver, called in sick, and spent the day nursing my wounded pride with ice cream and bad television. But stubbornness, pure stubbornness, kept my feet planted. I was her sister. I'd been invited. And I'd be damned if I'd give her the satisfaction of my absence. Guests started arriving around 4 p.m. From my position behind the pillar, I watched as people found their seats, greeted each other, took photos. I recognized some faces, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. None of them noticed me, tucked away in my corner. Our mother arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony, resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was escorted to the front row by a groomsman, beaming, accepting congratulations from everyone she passed. She didn't look back, didn't scan the crowd for her younger daughter. Why would she? I was exactly where I was supposed to be, invisible. The ceremony began at 5, precisely. Music swelled from hidden speakers. The wedding party processed down the aisle. The bridesmaids, all beautiful in their matching sage green dresses, carrying bouquets of white roses. Groomsmen in sharp navy suits. Then the ring bearer and flower girl, kids I didn't recognize, probably from Gregory's family. Finally, Victoria appeared on our father's arm. Even from my obstructed view, I could see she was stunning. Her dress, a masterpiece of lace and silk, her veil trailing like a cloud. Our father, who I'd barely spoken to since my parents divorced 5 years earlier, looked proud and distinguished in his tuxedo. I craned my neck around the pillar, trying to catch a better view. The angle was terrible. I could see maybe 40% of the actual ceremony, mostly just the backs of people's heads and occasional glimpses of the officiant. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone. In the back row, 2 chairs away from me, sat a man, partially hidden by the same pillar. He was younger than most of the guests, maybe early 30s, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Dark hair, styled casually. He had those sharp features you see in magazine ads. But what struck me most was his expression. He looked as out of place and uncomfortable as I felt. He caught me looking and offered a small, sympathetic smile. I smiled back weakly before returning my attention to the ceremony, or what I could see of it. The officiant spoke about love and commitment. Victoria and Gregory exchanged vows I couldn't quite hear. They exchanged rings, kissed to enthusiastic applause. And, just like that, my sister was married. The ceremony lasted maybe 25 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter. As guests began to stand and move towards the cocktail hour, the stranger from my row approached me. Up close, he was even more striking, with intelligent gray eyes that seemed to see more than they should. That was quite a view, wasn't it? His voice carried a hint of amusement. Spectacular, I replied dryly. I especially enjoyed the back of that gentleman's head in row 8. Very photogenic. He laughed. A genuine sound that made something in my chest loosen slightly. I'm Julian. And I'm guessing, from your prime seating assignment, that you're either someone's least favorite relative or you insulted the wedding planner. Elizabeth. And I'm the bride's sister, actually. His eyebrows rose, surprise crossing his features. Her sister? And they put you back here. Apparently, I'm not part of the wedding aesthetic. Julian studied me for a moment, and I had the distinct impression he was seeing far more than my bitter humor. Well, that's their loss. The cocktail hour is about to start, and I have a feeling it's going to be just as awkward as the ceremony. What do you say we face it together? You don't have to pity me. I'm fine. It's not pity. It's strategic alliance. I'm here as a +1 for my business associate who couldn't make it. Which means I know exactly 3 people at this wedding. And 2 of them are the couple who just got married and won't remember I exist. So really, you'd be doing me a favor. There was something so genuine in his offer, something that made me want to say yes despite my wounded pride. Before I could respond, he extended his arm in an old-fashioned gesture. Shall we? I hesitated for only a moment before linking my arm through his. Together, we walked towards the cocktail hour, and for the first time since arriving at this wedding, I didn't feel completely alone. The cocktail hour was held in a spacious pavilion overlooking the lake. Round tables, more flowers, candles. A bar dominated one wall, and servers circulated with trays of appetizers that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Almost. As a pastry chef, I have strong feelings about food as art, and whoever catered this event knew their craft. Julian stayed close as we navigated the crowd. People clustered in small groups, conversations buzzing with the pleasant energy that comes with free-flowing champagne and wedding day cheer. Several guests glanced our way, probably wondering who he was and why he'd attached himself to the bride's invisible sister. We found a quiet table near the edge of the pavilion. Julian returned from the bar with 2 glasses of wine and a plate of appetizers he'd somehow convinced a server to compile for us. So, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Tell me about your sister. What's she like when she's not starring in the wedding of the century? I took a sip of wine, considering how to answer. The truth felt too raw, too revealing, but something about Julian's steady gaze made me want to be honest. Victoria is perfect. Or at least, she's always worked very hard to appear perfect. Good grades, good career, good relationships. She's the daughter every parent dreams of having. And you're not. I'm the daughter who became a pastry chef instead of a doctor or lawyer. Who lives in a small apartment instead of a house with a mortgage? Who dates occasionally instead of landing a pharmaceutical director with excellent prospects? I'm the disappointment. The one who didn't follow the script. Julian selected a crab cake from the plate. Not everyone can master that craft, you know. Try telling my mother that. She still introduces me as Elizabeth, who works with food. Like I'm flipping burgers at a fast food chain. Family dynamics can be complicated. That's a diplomatic way of saying my family is dysfunctional. I grabbed a stuffed mushroom, suddenly ravenous. I'd been too nervous to eat earlier. What about you? What do you do that landed you an invitation to this event? I work in renewable energy consulting. My company helps businesses transition to sustainable practices. Boring technical stuff that makes people's eyes glaze over at parties. That doesn't sound boring at all. It sounds important. Thanks. Most people just want to know if I can get them a deal on solar panels. He smiled, but there was something guarded in his expression. I was supposed to be here with my colleague, Dominic. He's the one who actually knows the groom through some business connection, but he came down with pneumonia last week, and I got volunteered to represent our company. So, we're both wedding crashers in our own way. Survivors of inadequate seating arrangements, at least. We talked through the cocktail hour, and I found myself relaxing despite the circumstances. Julian was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite small talk. He wanted to know about my favorite desserts to make, the challenges of working in a professional kitchen, why I'd chosen pastry over other culinary paths. I asked him about his work, about the satisfaction of helping companies reduce their environmental impact, the frustrations of dealing with clients who wanted change but weren't willing to do the hard work. He spoke passionately about renewable energy, about creating systems for future generations. I found myself captivated by his enthusiasm. You really believe in what you do, I observed. Is that so surprising? Most people at my sister's wedding seem more interested in appearing successful than actually being passionate about anything. Julian's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. You notice a lot for someone who is sitting behind a pillar. When you're invisible, you learn to watch people. It's amazing what you see when no one knows you're looking. A server approached to announce that dinner was being served in the main ballroom. Guests began flowing towards the entrance, and Julian stood, offering his hand. Ready to see if your seating assignment for dinner is any better? It wasn't. The reception hall was gorgeous, decorated with what must have been thousands of dollars worth of flowers and lighting. Long tables were arranged in a U-shape, with the head table slightly elevated where Victoria and Gregory would sit. Place cards directed guests to their assigned seats. I found my name at a table in the far corner, positioned so I'd need to crane my neck awkwardly to see the head table. The chairs around me were empty, suggesting I'd been placed with the overflow guests, the people who had to be invited, but didn't quite fit anywhere else. Julian appeared at my elbow, his own place card in hand. Interesting. I'm at the opposite end of the room. Almost like someone wanted to make sure the unimportant guests were spread out so we wouldn't cluster and make the seating chart look unbalanced. This is ridiculous. The words came out sharper than I intended, frustration finally breaking through my careful composure. I'm her sister, her only sibling, and she's treating me like some distant acquaintance she felt obligated to invite. You know what? Screw the seating chart. Julian plucked my place card from the table and pocketed it, along with his own. Come on. What are you doing? Improvising. Just follow my lead and pretend you're my date. Before I could protest, he guided me toward a table much closer to the head table, one clearly designated for important guests. He pulled out a chair for me, his hand warm on my back as I sat, then settled into the seat beside me with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Julian, we can, and we did. If anyone asks, there was a mix-up with the seating assignments, and we're fixing it ourselves. Trust me. The table filled quickly with guests who seemed to know each other well. They were Gregory's business associates, I gathered from their conversation, people from the pharmaceutical industry who spoke in acronyms and trade terms I didn't understand. They greeted Julian with familiarity, calling him by name, and he responded with easy confidence. A woman named Patricia, who introduced herself as the Vice President of Operations at Bennett Health Solutions, smiled warmly at me. And you must be Julian's girlfriend. He's been keeping you a secret. I opened my mouth to correct her, but Julian smoothly interjected. Elizabeth prefers to stay out of the spotlight. She's not one for corporate events, usually, but she made an exception for this wedding. How sweet. And how do you know the bride and groom? Elizabeth is Victoria's sister, actually. Patricia's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Oh, I had no idea Victoria had a sister. She never mentioned it during any of our meetings about the wedding arrangements. Her smile faltered slightly, as if realizing how that sounded. I mean, I'm sure it just never came up in conversation. I'm sure, I replied, keeping my voice neutral, even as the comment stung. My sister had worked closely enough with Gregory's colleagues to plan aspects of this wedding, and she'd never once mentioned having a sister. Dinner was served in courses, each plate more elaborate than the last. Seared scallops gave way to a fresh salad, then a choice of beef tenderloin or herb-crusted salmon. The food was exceptional, but I barely tasted it. I was too aware of Julian beside me, of the way he played his role as my date with convincing ease. His hand occasionally touched my shoulder or back in small gestures that looked casual but felt intentional. He included me in conversations, deferred to my opinions, made me feel visible in a way I hadn't felt since arriving at this wedding. Between courses, Gregory's father stood to give a speech. He talked about his son's accomplishments, about how proud he was to welcome Victoria into their family, about the bright future ahead of the young couple. He mentioned how Victoria had brought joy and sophistication into Gregory's life, how she was exactly the kind of woman he'd always hoped his son would marry. My mother stood next. Her speech was shorter but no less effusive. She spoke about Victoria's childhood, her daughter's determination and grace, how she'd always known Victoria would achieve great things. She talked about the wedding planning process, about mother-daughter shopping trips and cake tastings, and all the precious moments they'd shared. She didn't mention me. Not once. It was as if I'd been edited out of the family history entirely. I felt Julian's hand find mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture of support. I squeezed back, so grateful for the anchor. Then came the best man's speech, full of jokes about Gregory's bachelor days and heartfelt sentiments about finding true love. The maid of honor followed with stories about Victoria's perfectionism and her romantic nature, about how she'd always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding. I waited for someone to mention me, to acknowledge my existence in even the most minimal way. But speech after speech passed, and my name never came up. I was the ghost at the feast, present but unseen. Dessert was served, an elaborate tiered creation of chocolate and raspberry that looked impressive, but lacked the depth of flavor it should have had. The ganache was too sweet, the cake layers too dry. As a professional, I couldn't help but critique it, and Julian noticed my expression. Not up to your standards? It's beautiful, but beauty isn't everything. The execution is off. The chocolate is masking the raspberry instead of complementing it, and the texture is too dense. Could you do better? In my sleep. The words came out more confident than I felt, but they were true. I might be the family disappointment in every other area, but in the kitchen, I knew my worth. I believe you, Julian said simply. After dessert, the reception transitioned into the dancing portion of the evening. Victoria and Gregory took the floor for their first dance, swirling together under perfect lighting, while a live band played a romantic ballad. They looked like something from a magazine. The perfect couple having their perfect moment. My father cut in for the father-daughter dance, and I watched the two of them move together, remembering the times he'd spun me around our living room when I was small, before the divorce, before everything fell apart. Did Victoria remember those times? Did she ever think about the family we used to be? Julian stood and offered his hand. Dance with me. You don't have to keep playing the attentive date. I'm fine. I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, I'm a terrible dancer and I need someone to step on who won't sue me. I let him lead me onto the dance floor. He wasn't terrible at all. He was quite good, actually, leading with confidence while keeping a respectful distance. We swayed to the music and I found myself relaxing into the rhythm, into the moment. Thank you, I said quietly. For tonight. For sitting with me. For the whole fake date thing. You didn't have to do any of this. Maybe I wanted to. You're interesting, Elizabeth. More interesting than anyone else at this wedding. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're talented and underappreciated. I know you see through the superficial nonsense that most people accept without question. I know you're hurt, but you're trying not to show it, and that takes strength. His words hit something deep inside me, a place I'd been protecting all evening. My eyes burned with unshed tears, and I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry at my sister's wedding. The song ended and transitioned into something more upbeat. Other couples joined the dance floor, and Julian guided us to the edge, away from the crowd. I need some air, I admitted. Let's go outside. We slipped out of the ballroom onto a terrace that overlooked the gardens. The evening air was cool and welcome after the warmth of the crowded reception. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere that felt at odds with the turmoil inside me. "I shouldn't have come," I said, leaning against the terrace railing. I knew it would be like this, but some part of me hoped it would be different. That maybe Victoria would remember we're sisters. That maybe she'd want me here for real, and not just to check a box on her obligation list. Julian stood beside me, his shoulder touching mine. Family can be the most complicated relationship we have. We're bound to them by blood, but that doesn't guarantee love or respect or even basic consideration. You sound like you're speaking from experience. My father and I haven't spoken in 3 years. He had very specific plans for my life. And when I chose a different path, he made it clear I was no longer the son he wanted. So yes, I understand what it feels like to be the disappointment. I turned to look at him, seeing new layers in his expression. "I'm sorry. That must have been painful." It was. It is. But I learned something important from it. The people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are still people with their own limitations and prejudices and failures. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. Is that what tonight is? You choosing to be kind to a stranger. Maybe it started that way. But you're not a stranger anymore, Elizabeth. And this isn't just kindness. There was something in his voice, something that made my heart beat faster. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened and a group of guests spilled out, laughing and talking. The moment broke and Julian stepped back slightly. "We should probably go back inside. I think they're about to cut the cake." The cake-cutting ceremony was everything I expected. More photos, more speeches, more perfect moments carefully choreographed for maximum impact. Victoria fed Gregory a small bite with delicate precision, and he returned the gesture with equal care. No smashed cake in faces. Nothing undignified. Perfect control, as always. As servers distributed slices of the wedding cake, I noticed my mother making her way through the crowd, stopping to chat with various guests. She was in her element, basking in the reflected glory of her daughter's successful wedding. When her gaze finally landed on me, surprise flickered across her features, followed quickly by disapproval. She approached our table with measured steps, her smile tightening as she drew closer. "Elizabeth, I didn't expect to see you sitting here. This table was reserved for Gregory's business associates." "There was a seating mix-up," Julian said smoothly before I could respond. "I'm Julian, one of Gregory's renewable energy consultants. Elizabeth and I are here together." My mother's gaze swept over Julian, taking in his expensive suit and confident demeanor. I could see her recalculating, reassessing my presence based on the caliber of my companion. "I see. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Julian. I'm Eleanor, Victoria's mother." She emphasized the words as if to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. I wasn't aware Elizabeth was seeing anyone. "We've been keeping things quiet," Julian replied, his hand finding mine on the table. "Elizabeth is quite private about her personal life." "Yes, she is." Eleanor's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Elizabeth, dear, I hope you're enjoying the wedding." Victoria worked so hard to make everything perfect. "It's beautiful," I said, forcing the words out. "She must be very happy." "She is. Gregory is exactly the kind of man I always hoped she'd marry. Successful, established, from a good family. It's everything a mother could want for her daughter." The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. "Unlike you, who works in a bakery and lives alone and has nothing to show for your life." Julian's grip on my hand tightened slightly, a silent show of support. "Elizabeth was just telling me about her work as a pastry chef," he interjected. "It sounds incredibly demanding. Not everyone has the talent or discipline to succeed in that field." Eleanor's expression flickered with annoyance at having her implied criticism deflected. "Yes, well, we all have our different paths. I should get back to the other guests. Do try to enjoy yourself, Elizabeth." She swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and maternal disappointment in her wake. "That was unpleasant," Julian observed when she was out of earshot. "That was my mother on a good day. You should see her when she's really trying to make a point. I'm starting to understand why you were sitting behind that pillar." The evening wore on. The band played. People danced. Drinks flowed freely. Victoria and Gregory made their rounds, thanking guests for coming and accepting congratulations. I watched them work the room with practiced efficiency, noting how they spent more time with some guests than others, how they carefully maintained the hierarchy of importance. They reached our table eventually, Gregory leading with a politician's smile. Up close, I could see he was handsome in a conventional way, with the kind of features that photographed well but lacked character. His handshake was firm but perfunctory when Julian introduced himself. Then Victoria's eyes landed on me, and something complex passed across her face. Surprise, definitely. Discomfort, perhaps. She'd probably forgotten I was even here, tucked away in my assigned corner where I couldn't interfere with her perfect day. "Elizabeth, you look lovely," she said, her voice carrying that careful politeness people use with acquaintances they don't quite remember. "Thank you. The wedding is beautiful, Victoria. Congratulations. I'm so glad you could make it. And I see you've met some of Gregory's colleagues." Her gaze slid to Julian with curiosity. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Julian. "I work with Gregory on sustainability initiatives for Bennett Health Solutions, and I have the pleasure of being Elizabeth's date this evening." Victoria's eyes widened slightly. This was clearly news to her. "Oh, I didn't realize you were seeing anyone, Elizabeth." "How wonderful." The way she said it, with that slight emphasis on the word wonderful, suggested she found it more surprising than wonderful, as if she couldn't quite believe someone like Julian would be interested in someone like me. "We've been dating for a few months," Julian continued, his arm sliding around my waist in a gesture that looked natural and possessive. "Elizabeth is remarkable. I count myself lucky she tolerates my workaholic tendencies." "How nice," Victoria said, though her smile had frozen slightly. "Well, we should continue making our rounds. So many people to thank, but let's catch up properly soon, Elizabeth. I feel like we haven't really talked in ages." They moved on, and I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That was surreal. "She seems surprised to see you looking happy." Victoria isn't used to me having anything she might consider valuable, including a handsome date who impresses her new in-laws. "So, you think I'm handsome?" Julian's eyes danced with amusement. "Don't let it go to your head. You're objectively attractive. It's not a personal observation." "Of course not. Purely objective." Around 10 p.m., the wedding coordinator announced that the bride and groom would be leaving shortly. Guests were invited to line up outside with sparklers for the send-off. I debated skipping this part, but Julian convinced me to participate. "You came this far? Might as well see it through to the end." We stood in line as sparklers were distributed. And when Victoria and Gregory emerged, we held our sparkling lights high along with everyone else. They ran through the corridor of light, laughing and waving, before climbing into a luxury car that would take them to their honeymoon suite at the resort. As the car pulled away, taillights disappearing into the night, I felt a strange sense of finality. The wedding was over. Victoria had gotten her perfect day, her perfect marriage, her perfect life, and I had stood witness to it all from my position on the margins, exactly where she wanted me. Guests began dispersing, some heading to their rooms, others towards the parking lot. Julian and I lingered on the steps, neither of us quite ready to acknowledge that the evening was ending. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asked. "I'm actually staying at the resort tonight, room 314. I figured it would be easier than driving back to Denver this late." I hesitated, then added, "What about you?" "Same. Room 209. My colleague had already booked the room before he got sick, so it seemed wasteful not to use it." We walked slowly through the gardens, following the lit path back towards the main resort building. The night air had cooled further, and I shivered slightly in my thin dress. Julian immediately shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. A gesture so classic and unexpected that I almost laughed. "You don't have to do that. I'm fine. Humor me. I was raised with old-fashioned manners, and my mother would haunt me if I let you freeze." His jacket was warm and smelled like expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. I pulled it closer, grateful for both the warmth and the excuse to keep something of his with me a little longer. "Thank you," I said, "for everything tonight. You turned what could have been a miserable evening into something almost bearable. Just bearable? I'll have to work on my fake dating skills. Okay, better than bearable. Surprisingly pleasant in parts. That's more like it. He stopped walking, turning to face me. Elizabeth, I know tonight started as a strategic alliance between two wedding outcasts, but I want you to know it became more than that for me. You're genuinely interesting, funny, talented, and far too good for people who can't see your worth. His words wrapped around something fragile inside me, something I'd been protecting all evening. My breath hitched. Julian, I know we just met, but I want to see you again after tonight, after this wedding. In the real world, where we're just two people without assigned seating charts and family drama. I wanted to say yes immediately. Every instinct told me this man was different, that this connection was real despite the unusual circumstances. But doubt crept in. That voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother, reminding me that men like Julian didn't date women like me, that this was probably just kindness extended through one evening and nothing more. You don't have to say that just because you felt sorry for me tonight. I'm not. I'm saying it because I spent the evening with someone I genuinely enjoyed. And I want more evenings like that. Because you make me laugh and think and feel less alone in crowded rooms. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing better. He paused, vulnerability crossing his features. But if you're not interested, I understand. I don't want to push. I am interested, I admitted, the words rushing out before I could second-guess them. I just don't want to get my hopes up about something that might disappear in the morning light. Then let's make sure it doesn't disappear. Have breakfast with me tomorrow. The resort has a decent restaurant, and we can talk without tuxedos and wedding stress. What do you say? Breakfast sounds good. His smile was genuine and relieved. 9 a.m. I'll meet you in the lobby. We'd reached the entrance to the resort. The lobby beyond was quiet, most guests having already retired. This was the moment where the evening would officially end, where we'd go our separate ways, and I'd be alone with the weight of everything I'd witnessed and endured. Julian seemed reluctant to leave, too. He stood close, his hands still holding mine, his eyes searching my face as if trying to memorize it. Good night, Elizabeth. I'm glad I crashed your sister's wedding. I'm glad you did, too. Good night, Julian. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. I didn't want. His lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle and questioning and somehow exactly right. It lasted only a moment before he pulled back, his thumb brushing my cheek. Then he was walking away toward the elevators, and I was standing alone in the lobby, wearing his jacket, touching my lips and wondering what exactly had just happened. I made my way to my room in a daze. The space was nice, decorated in neutral tones with a view of the gardens. I hung Julian's jacket carefully in the closet, changed into my pajamas, and collapsed onto the bed. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thanks for coming tonight. It meant a lot to have you there. I stared at the message for a long moment. It meant a lot? Really? Was that why she'd relegated me to the worst seat in the house? Why she'd never mentioned having a sister? Why she'd looked surprised to find me at a decent table during the reception? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on something noncommittal. Congratulations again. The wedding was beautiful. She responded immediately. We should definitely get together when I'm back from the honeymoon. I want to hear all about your new boyfriend. He seems very successful. Of course, that's what she'd taken away from the evening. Not that I'd been there supporting her, not that we'd barely spoken all night, but that I'd shown up with an impressive date. That was the only thing that made me visible to her. I didn't respond. Instead, I set my phone aside and stared at the ceiling, processing the emotional whiplash of the entire day. I'd come to this wedding expecting to feel like an outsider, and I'd been proven right in the worst ways. But I'd also met Julian, had those hours of feeling seen and valued, and now I had breakfast to look forward to in the morning. Sleep came slowly, my mind replaying moments from the evening. Victoria's perfect smile, my mother's dismissive comments, Julian's hand in mine, the sparklers lighting up the night sky. Tomorrow, I'd go home to Denver, back to my apartment, my job, my regular life. But something had shifted tonight. Some fundamental understanding about my place in my family and my own worth. I woke around 8 the next morning to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the previous day came flooding back, bringing with it a mix of emotions I wasn't quite ready to face. I showered and dressed carefully in casual clothes I'd packed, trying to look effortlessly pretty without seeming like I was trying too hard. The irony wasn't lost on me. After spending an entire wedding being invisible, I was now worried about making a good impression on a man I'd just met. Julian was waiting in the lobby at 9 exactly, looking refreshed in jeans and a navy sweater that made his gray eyes even more striking. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine expression that made my stomach flutter. "Good morning. You look beautiful. You look pretty good yourself." Is that my line, though? Aren't men supposed to be the ones getting compliments on their appearance? I believe in equal opportunity compliments. Come on, I heard they make excellent waffles here. The restaurant was moderately busy with other hotel guests, but we found a quiet table by the window overlooking the lake. Morning light sparkled on the water, and the whole scene felt peaceful in a way the previous day's festivities hadn't. Over breakfast, we talked more freely than we had at the wedding. Julian told me about his work, about a particularly challenging project he was managing with a manufacturing company resistant to change. I told him about the bakery, about my boss who was brilliant but temperamental, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and delicious that brought joy to people. "You light up when you talk about baking," Julian observed, cutting into his waffle. "It's obvious you love what you do." "I do. It's the one area of my life where I feel completely confident. No second guessing, no wondering if I'm good enough. I know I'm good at what I do." "Then why do you let your family make you feel otherwise?" The question was direct, almost confrontational, but his tone remained gentle. I set down my fork, considering how to answer. "Because they're my family. Because some part of me still wants their approval, even though I know I'll never get it. Not the way Victoria gets it, anyway. What if you stopped wanting their approval? What if you decided your opinion of yourself mattered more than theirs? Easier said than done when you've spent your whole life being compared to someone and coming up short." Julian reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. And I don't say that lightly." We finished breakfast and walked outside, neither of us quite ready to part ways. The morning was beautiful, the kind of June day that promised summer without the oppressive heat. Other guests were checking out, loading luggage into cars, heading back to their regular lives. "I should probably get on the road soon," I said reluctantly. "I have work tomorrow, and I need to prep some things this afternoon." "Before you go, can I ask you something?" Julian's expression turned serious. "Last night, watching how your family treated you, seeing how they've made you feel small and unimportant, it made me angry. Not just sympathetic, but genuinely angry on your behalf." "That's kind of you. But I'm not finished. What if there was a way to change the narrative? To make them see you differently? To give you back some of the power they've been taking from you all these years?" I studied his face, trying to understand where this was going. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we continued this? Not fake dating, but real dating? What if we spent time together, built something genuine, and along the way showed your family that you're not the disappointment they've painted you as?" "Julian, I'm not going to use you to make my family jealous. That's not fair to you. You wouldn't be using me. I'm offering because I want to see you again regardless. But I also want to help you if I can. Think about it. Your sister just married a pharmaceutical executive, right? Well, I happen to be someone her new husband's company needs. Someone who could make things very interesting for them." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What are you saying exactly?" Julian's expression shifted, becoming more calculating than I'd seen.